One of the most impressive features introduced in DaVinci 11 is new node structure levels. And to understand it, we need to understand two things first. If you look at a timeline where you have many shots that you're grading, you have two levels of dealing with the timeline. You can either have nodes that affect the entire timeline or nodes that affect a certain clip. So if you add any nodes to the timeline node structure, all the nodes will affect the entire timeline. However, the nodes in the clip structure will only affect this particular clip. One more thing to talk about. The arrangement of the nodes in a certain node structure will affect the final look. So if we rearrange the same nodes in a different chain, or we just change their positions in the node structure, the look will be fundamentally different. So it's very important to understand how changing the flow or rearranging nodes will actually give a different image. So let's say that we have different shots that look very similar to start with, pre-grading. The shots were shot with the same camera on the same day with the same lighting, and they already look very similar. So instead of wasting our time working on every shot separately and just copying the grade from one shot to another, and every time we want to change something, we just have to change one of the shots and keep on copying to the rest of the shots, what we usually do is that we group these shots into one group and we apply one effect that affects every shot in this particular group. And whenever we want to change something about a certain shot, what we do is that we actually affect the shot on the clip level. So we can apply nodes to a certain shot. So now we have two levels. We can either apply nodes to a group affecting the entire group, or we can apply nodes to a certain shot in the group. Great. But this created a small problem. Remember when we said that the flow of nodes or the arrangement of nodes actually affects the final image? If we look at this thing where we actually have two different levels, the problem here is that once we apply changes on the node level, all the changes that happens on the group level are happening before the nodes of this particular shot, which means that whenever we want to change something on the group level, or we actually, apply any changes on the group level, it's basically affecting the entire structure in a different way. It will affect the rest of the shots in one way, and the shot with clip nodes in a different way entirely. This usually caused a problem. In order to solve this in DaVinci 11, they introduced a new level of node structure. Basically, they treated everything that is coming out of these nodes as a clean slate now. And we have a new level now where we can apply the nodes to the output from these images, working from a clean slate. Remember when we said that for any timeline we have two different levels, which is the timeline and the clip level of adding nodes? Once we add a group, we will have two new node structure levels, which is the pre-group and the post-group levels. So the pre-group will affect everything in the group before any clip adjustments. Then we have the clip level, which basically will affect clips individually. And then we have the post-group level, which basically is working on a clean slate, maybe to give the entire film a certain look. And then we have the timeline, which will of course affect our entire timeline. To demonstrate this, we're in Resolve now, and if you go to the node structure here on the top right, you'll find a drop-down menu that has two options, clip or timeline. If I'm on timeline, whatever I do here will affect the entire timeline. So if I now add a node and I just take the saturation out, now the entire timeline is black and white, because now I'm on timeline. Let's delete this node and get this back to clip. Now whatever we do here will affect only the current clip that we're selecting. These three shots, they look similar. So what I'll do, I'll just select the first shot, the second shot, the third shot, and right click, and now I have an option to create a new group. I'll just create a new group and hit OK. Now these three shots are a part of a group. We can tell by this icon on the top of every thumbnail. Now if we go back to the drop-down menu on the top right, we have two new options. We have group pre-clip added and group post-clip. This means that if I go to group pre-clip, whatever I do here will affect this group as the first nodes that affect this group. So this will be pre-clip. All these nodes that I place here will be placed before the nodes of the clip. So I can simply come here and just increase the saturation, and now I increase the saturation of the entire group. However, this shot still needs some saturation. So what I'll do, I'll come to the drop-down menu here and go to clip. Now, whatever I do here will only affect this clip. I'm going to increase the saturation on the clip level. And now, if I look at this shot and the other shots, I realize that I want to reduce the saturation in the shadows for the entire group. So what I'll do, I'll just go to the drop-down menu and choose Group Post-Clip. And now whatever I do here, all the nodes that I place here are going to be placed after the clip nodes. Now on the post-clip nodes, I'm just going to reduce the saturation of shadows and increase the saturation of the midtones. And maybe I'll just add some yellow to the highlights. This is why this structure is very important, because before, whatever you applied on the group level used to be applied before the clip's nodes, which wasn't always the most optimal thing to do.